Welcome to the Men on Purpose podcast, featuring dynamic conversations with emerging and established visionary men on purpose. Thanks for joining us today as we celebrate the men on purpose who are committed, creative, courageous changemakers, living their best, most fulfilling life possible. Now, here's the host of Men on Purpose, Ian Lobas.
Everybody, welcome back to the Men on Purpose podcast. Today's episode, very special. And I know I say that every time, but this one is different. The guest is very different. It's a very different subject material. Before I get into that, let me remind you, you can get everything you need from menonpurposepodcast.com. I'm so grateful and thankful to all of you who reach out and download and rate and review this podcast and subscribe, and like anything you need is on menonpurposepodcast.com. The show notes, the information for every guest, their Instagram handles, their websites, you name it, you can get that. menonpurposepodcast.com or my website, ianlobas.com, IANLOBAS.com. Remember, if you haven't yet done it, please make sure you subscribe to the Men on Purpose podcast on iTunes, right? Leave us a 5-star review. Do me a favor, screenshot that. I know it's cheesy. Screenshot it, DM it to me, email it to me, text it to me with your address, and I'll send you a Men on Purpose t-shirt. And I know it's cheesy. I think it's freaking cool. These t-shirts are freaking awesome, and I want to get them out to everybody. So if you feel like it, do it. I'd love it. I greatly appreciate it. So here's the deal. Let me tell you about this episode today. Obviously, you know my 5 E's, my promise, my commitment, our mission: elevate, educate, empower, enrich, and evolve. This podcast, the information, the guests, your education, everything that we possibly can do. I'm looking to elevate this thing each and every time. Now, my guest today, his name is Shu Matsuo Post. And Shu is a very extraordinary guy. She wrote a book called I Took Her Name. And I'm not going to give you too much more information on the book or the subject. Let me tell you what we talk about today. It's a little bit more depth than a lot of the conversations you're used to on here. So we talk about, just get ready. We talk about male authenticity, leadership, awareness, impact, changes in society, vulnerability, sexuality, gender roles, feelings and emotions. We talk about his book, I Took Her Name. We talk about feminism. We talk about race, equal opportunities. We talk about challenging men's mindsets, right? The traditional stereotypical gender roles that men have. Expectations, the freedom in life and mind by making choices or releasing societal stereotypes. Gender bias and expectations, masculine and feminine energy, the responsibility in parenting and education to advise our kids on feelings and emotions, and then what we do to shift the scales. And I know that sounds like a lot, and it is. And the episode's an hour long, and I promise you it gets deep. I get deep and very vulnerable in it, sharing my feelings, my emotions about things, and my genuine curiosity to Shu, just wanting to understand his views, why he wrote his book, you know, the messages he's going for, the stand he's taking. It's really cool. Honestly, I think you're absolutely going to love this episode. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with Shu Matsuo Post. All right, Shu, welcome, my friend.
Ian, thanks for having me and inviting me to be on your show.
No, it's awesome because, you know, like, actually, obviously we're just saying this off, you know, the recording, but I get a lot of people who send me potential bookings for the show, right? And most of them I say no to because, you know, my commitment to elevate, educate, empower, enrich, and evolve, right? This podcast, the information, the guests, everything's got to be going bigger, better, but not in a egotistical way. I just want to give the best content, the best information, the best education, the best shifts and changes you can make in your life to just do your thing. And when I saw yours, I was like, I've never seen that before. That guy's an in. I don't care what he has to say. That's interesting. So I'm not gonna tell the audience. Yeah, you're gonna tell them your story, and we're gonna talk about all kinds of cool stuff like authenticity and vulnerability and leadership and masculinity and femininity. Like, we're going to talk about all kinds of cool stuff today. So I just did an intro, obviously, in the beginning of this show, but a little bit about you, and then just like let's roll into your story, man. How you are who you are today. I think that's probably the best thing we can do right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the intro. And first of all, I love your show. It's so inspiring, educational, and yeah, it's such good stuff. You're creating so much good content, and I'm so honored to be on your show. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about myself. My name is Shu Matsuo Post. I am a husband, a brand new father of a four-month-old son.
Wow.
Thank you. And the author of my first book, which got published on December 1st. It's called I Took Her Name.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in the real estate business for my full-time job. I'm currently on the paternity leave, so I'm not working on that job right now. But my wife and I also have a small real estate business in the U.S.
Nice.
So I know you're in real estate.
Yeah. I didn't see that in your bio. That's awesome, man. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my story. So I wrote this book because I wanted to share my message with other men out there. So when my wife and I got married about 3.5 years ago, we decided to combine our last names. And what ended up happening in Japan, where I'm from, was actually I had to literally take her name to have the combined names of Matsuo and Post. So Matsuo was my birth name, Post was her name. And because Japan doesn't recognize married couples to have separate names by law, which is a huge controversy today. And when I went through that name changing process, I didn't realize how much this world was tilted in men's favor.
Sure.
Well, let me put it this way. Our society, I just definitely felt like our society was designed for men, because so many women, most of the time it's women, the wife, right, who ends up taking the husband's name all over the world, not just in Japan. And men don't really think about that kind of stuff until we actually go through that process. And I did, as one of few men. And I'm glad that I did, because I saw something that I would have never seen, you know. And that's when I that's when I realized that, man, like, if there is gender inequality in just a once in a lifetime activity like changing your name, what else is out there in our everyday life? And I started to do more research, and I started to think about what I go through every day, and I just found a lot of things that I wouldn't have realized before. And
back up, because I want to give the more of the genesis of this. So you're in order to do like a hyphenated, right? In order to do, is that what it, like if you were in the States, it would be hyphenated. In order to do a hyphenated name combining, you had to take, I guess I don't understand it enough, because is it, so your wife, describe your wife and talk about her. So I want the audience to get it, and myself actually, to get a better understanding of why it happened like it happened, what your wife's decision was, your decision, then the government's intervention, and then how this whole thing kind of came about.
Yeah. So my wife is American, and we met in Hong Kong. So we were in Hong Kong at the same time, happened to be working in Hong Kong at the same time. So we met about 6 or 7 years ago. And, she is a feminist, a big time feminist. And at the time, I didn't know what a feminist was, even though I'd like to think that I believed in gender equality. But she's the one that really educated me. She's a teacher by nature. So she educated me what a feminist is. So, at first, when I first heard about the term feminist, I was like, whoa, hold on. Like, are you one of those, men-hating, angry women? But she clearly isn't. You don't have to be that to be a feminist. And that's something I learned by meeting
that you say that,
her.
because in like, I'll admit this, same thing in my mind. That's what came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest stigma around the word feminism, right? It's like men hating, angry, aggressive women. And that's what I thought too. But feminism is just, believing in gender equality. That's it. So if you believe in gender equality, you're a feminist. That's something that Emma Watson famously said a few years ago too. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I can be a feminist. I should be a feminist. And, that's when I kind of started my journey into feminism.
Sure.
And then, we ended up getting engaged, and we naturally started to talk about our last names, right? And she told me, hey, I really like my last name and it is my identity. So I'm not going to just take your name when we get married, if that's what you're expecting. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. No, I'm fine with that. Even though I had never thought about, having separate names with my spouse, or me changing my own name, right, as a man. Yep. So we started to talk about, okay, what should we do with our last name? And since we wanted to have kids, and we wanted our kids to have the same last name as us, we decided to combine our last names. So there's no hyphen in between our two names.
Okay, got
actually.
It.
So it's two, so it's Matsuo and Post with a space in between. And we actually got married in the US. So that's where we had a wedding. And the day after our wedding, we just went to a city hall and turned in our paperwork. Hey, we just got married and we want to change your last name. And then they were like, okay, cool, done. So it took like 10, 15 minutes max to change our last name. So I was like, oh, that was easy. And at the time, we were actually moving to Japan. And I wanted to change my name in my home country as well. So I tried to do the same thing by going to the city hall and telling them like, hey, I just got married in the US to an American individual. I'm going to change my name to Matsuo Post. And they were like, oh, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that as a Japanese national. You have to have, first of all, you can't combine two names, or you can't have separate names in Japan by law, which I actually didn't know at the time. So I was like, well, what can I do? And then the guy was like, you have to go to the family court to plead your case. So which is what I did, which is interesting. Yeah. So because in Japan, you have to have the same last name as a married couple, what happens is 96% of the time, it's the wife who ends up taking the husband's name. Sure. So I was naturally one of few men in Japan to go through this process to begin with, let alone, marrying a foreign national to have combined last names.
Yeah.
So I pleaded my case with this judge at the family court.
What was that like? Is the judge saying no and then you have to convince me yes? Is it like innocent until proven guilty?
Yeah, I was so determined because I was like, because that's what I had in my mind. Like, no, I'm going to do that in Japan too. What's that?
What do you say? I mean, obviously in America, it's probably much easier, just simpler. Yeah. But what do you say to the judge to convince him? Isn't it just, this is what I'd like to do? Or like, what's that process like?
Yeah, I wasn't going to take a no for an answer. So I was like, what can I do to make this happen? So that was kind of like my question to the judge. And then the judge was like, well, since you're marrying a foreign national, why don't you have her change her name first in her home country? And then why don't you just take her name entirely? So that's what we did. So I asked my wife to change her name in the US first to Matsuo Post. So her identity was already different. So technically I ended up taking her new name.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Matsuo Post. Yeah. So that was kind of like a loophole. And I was able to do that only because I married a foreign national.
So not a
Japanese
national, no.
Right. If I married a Japanese national, another Japanese person, I wouldn't have been able to do what we did, like combining last names, which is something that Japan is, it's a huge controversy for the government to change the law for married couples to have separate names or, whatever the names that they want. But yeah.
People need to understand that, this I think we're in like 96 countries. This is listened to this podcast. So I want to just make sure that people understand, like, there's like, if you're used to the US's way of doing things, which is a lot more lenient than most countries,
Mm-hmm.
like, it to me as a US citizen, it sounds like, well, why wouldn't they let you? It's just what you want to do, right? And it's not hurting
Mm-hmm.
anybody, but that's just not how it works there. So now let's get into, finish telling the story, and then I want to get into the lessons. I want to get into the like your ego, like things that you had to experience. Like, I also want to get to know your wife a little bit more.
Yeah. So when I went through that process, that really got me thinking, like, wow, I didn't know that I had to spend this much time and this much effort to just change my identity, my name, adding those four letters
Sure.
after my, birth name. Right. And, I just felt like it's kind of wrong to expect women to go through this as a culture. And this is not just Japan. I think it's all over the world, right?
It is.
And as a man, I never had to think about it because growing up, I thought my spouse was going to just change her name to mine.
Sure.
And I didn't have to go through this, right? But I actually changed my name too. And I got to experience this name changing journey. I changed my passport's names, driver's license, like every form of identity you can think of. And it takes a lot of time. And, I wish I didn't have to go through this, but I did. And, that's when I realized, like, wow, that's inequality. Like, there's a bias here between the genders, right? And, if there's a gender inequality in once in a lifetime activity like this, what else is there in our everyday life?
Sure.
And that's when I really looked into the bias, the gender bias that we live in, the gender expectations that we have in our lives. And this is by, culturally, they might be different. There are a lot of similarities between Japan and the US. And, I think feminism is gender equality, promoting gender equality. And when we achieve that, I really feel like, it's gonna free a lot of men as well. Obviously, it's about empowering women.
Yeah.
That's the most important goal. But also, it's gonna free a lot of men from, those gender expectations that we live by every single day. So that's what I became super passionate about, and I wanted to write a book and publish it so that, going through this process made me feel a lot freer than before. I feel more connected with myself. I feel more vulnerable. I embrace my vulnerability, and I feel more authentic with my true self, which is something that I really enjoy. It's not easy, but I enjoy being connected with my true self.
Well, talk about that, because I think there are so many men listening that, like, I don't think they'll ever get to a place where they have to explore the deepest depths. And that's a part of the 5 E's that we talk about: involvement and elevation, right? And empowerment, whatever. It's all 5 of them. You can consider it all 5 of them. But, like, I don't think most men actually have to take that kind of look at themselves. And I mean, it's not like there was a huge fight and you didn't, you were putting up this huge fight and all of a sudden, your wife won. Like, it wasn't like that, right? It was
not at all.
It was a very clear piece, but really the biggest fight was between gender stereotypes or gender rules, maybe unspoken, right? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess they are
then,
unspoken. I mean, I don't know anybody in the U.S. I mean, I don't know anybody. Doesn't mean there's not people like that. But I think the only country I've heard of is like Iceland or like Sweden, where I think everybody takes their dad's first name as their last name. Something like, I'm butchering that, but like something like that.
Yeah, Scandinavian countries are known for being super gender equal. Not like 100%, but I think some of the most gender equal countries in the world.
But still, if you take it based on the number you said, like 96% not, right? Just 96% of all women take their husband's last name. That's pretty unequal. But if
Yeah.
Scandinavian countries are 50% or better, that's a lot closer to equal than 96% for sure.
Yeah, I don't know about the last names, like, the percentage in Scandinavian countries, but there is this thing called Global Gender Index ranking, and they're like at the top. I think Iceland is at the top, and like Norway, Sweden, they're like top 5, and Japan is actually like one of the bottom countries, which makes me really sad to be a Japanese.
Where's the U.S.
citizen.
Around the bottom?
Somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I can't remember the ranking for 2020 for the US, but it's not very high. I was kind of taken aback. It's pretty like lower. Yeah.
It's not
On the
fun.
lower
I'm
side.
laughing. It's not funny because, the cool thing is there are so many things changing in the world right now. And guys like you don't, before I saw your request come in or from the people who book you, I'd never even thought about that. And in fact, my wife's name is like hyphenated, right? Because it was important for my wife because she's the last of 3 girls with the last name Snow. So her last name is hyphenated, and that was important to her. And I didn't have it's not my last. I mean, I don't care. I didn't have an issue, but I actually talked to a lot of people that did have an issue. And I think that what you're saying about vulnerability, I don't think those guys could get that deep within themselves to actually make that call. It was this way or nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and regardless of your political views, and I'll go here. Like, we just went through a bunch of that shit in this country where it's one way or nothing. And that's not how things should be working. Now, everybody can't have their say, but there has to be a little bit more pliability. There has to be a little bit more flex. Or if it's too rigid, it breaks. This is what happens. Buildings flex, bridges flex. This is what happens. Structures flex. If it's too rigid, it snaps, right? So you're one of the people that snapped some structure. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And, we talk about the opposite of feminism is this patriarchal world, right? Patriarchy, the system that favors men. And, I think patriarchy is what creates the gender norms. So, some experts talk about this thing called men box. So men are kind of trapped in this men box, which means like you can only be this way. Manhood is supposed to be just one certain way. You got to be strong. You gotta be successful, and your success has to be measured with numbers, right? Whether it's your career, sports, your physical strength,
height, weight.
Exactly.
Yep.
You can't show emotions other than aggression and anger. You have
Why do you think that is?
be.
I've talked to a lot of people about this. Like I told you before, like, I carry more feminine energy than I do masculine. So like I have buddies and that are push-ups and good. Look, I lift weights and I go to the gym and I'm a dude. I have 2 kids, obviously. I have enough masculine energy, but I choose to be more in the feminine, in all honesty. And I think there's a lot of guys that can't get that, and they think it's sexuality, but I choose to be just that flow state. And trust me, I have a lot of aggression and a lot of abrasiveness to my personality, but I choose to be in that flow state. Like, why do you think men just cannot go there? Most men cannot go.
Yeah, I think it's because as a society, society values masculinity over femininity for men, especially because for men, being like a woman, being like a girl is the biggest insult, right? So that means those men think that women are inferior to men. So men are better than women. Because if you don't think that way, we should embrace femininity as well.
Of course.
Those qualities are so beautiful, like being empathetic, traditional feminine qualities, right? Like being empathetic, being a good listener, supportive, caring, and all that stuff. Those are beautiful beautiful characters. And I think men should have those characters as well. And to me, that's being a good human. Masculinity is a good traits as well, like being in control, being independent, strong. But when you're only focused on those qualities, that can be very toxic as well. And there is no wonder why more men commit suicide, because they don't seek help. A lot of men don't seek help when they need it,
Sure.
with mental health, right? So they end up killing themselves or hurting other people. And I really think it's because those men or us men have a very difficult time exploring the other side of
Sure.
I guess, the gender spectrum. When you seek out help and show your emotions, there are people out there that want to help you. And when you share your vulnerabilities, it takes courage, but it feels great too. And when you get help that you need, that's when you connect with yourself and connect with other people. So I think more like men exploring like those feminine qualities is such an important aspect of our lives.
I think there's so many. I mean, our coaching business, we coach men and women, more men than women, but still like about 40% women. And what's interesting is a lot of the bigger corporate guys, who've been running big companies, or they run very large businesses. They're very locked into those roles. And I mean, frankly, most men that we coach are coming from most men that get coaching, and I'm saying get coaching because they're open to shift and transformation and vulnerability and digging in deep to find out what's up, what's going on, and the results of the stuff that they're dealing with. But I find that most men, myself included, like we were so trapped between two worlds that we want to have that flow and the ability to share openly and be honest and I just associate feminine with this, just like this beautiful, like just the ocean, just there, just undulating waves and power. But the power is used in a very soft way. The ocean's very powerful, but it's not like rocks falling against each other or lightning bolts, crazy. And I found that myself included, like sharing, well, one, no offense to my parents because they didn't learn this, but I didn't know how to talk about my feelings. I didn't understand my feelings, and I didn't understand what I was feeling or the emotions I was experiencing. So when you have that emotion of anxiety or depression or fear or panic or dread or whatever it might be, all of it that I learned this later on in my life through coaching, that all of it is not the same. Like no joke, one time in 2014 or 2013, I was very new in my real estate career. I was doing really well, but I was, my house was in foreclosure. Well, vulnerability. My house was in foreclosure. And just this shit was going down. Like, repo man's trying to get my cars. Like it was bad. And I remember like telling a shrink that I felt dread, and I felt like a bear was catching up to me and about to eat me. Like I felt like I was about to die. And I felt like every morning when I opened my eyes, the panic that hit me was like, I look over and someone's like holding a gun to my wife's head. Like that is not normal. But I didn't understand the gradient, the level of those feelings, because there's nothing. So this shrink, she was actually very good, but best shrink I've ever experienced. Like she started putting stages on the different feelings and emotions. And I think that one of my biggest challenges throughout my childhood and adolescence and even into college and beyond, until I was about 30, was no one ever taught me how to understand feelings and emotions. So most of it came out as aggressive masculine energy, but inside was this very this feminine energy just being trapped and held like almost like captive by this masculine energy that was me expressing myself, which really all I was doing was protecting myself from being hurt, because the couple times that I did voice my vulnerability or my pain or my struggle, I was met with resistance, made fun of, in school, like things like that. And so you put that shit away real fast when there's pain inside and then potential pain on the outside from other people. You're like, how can you not be conditioned to shut it down? And I think that what I was getting at before by saying, like, a lot of the men that I coach, I learned this through them too, is that they're shut down because one, we're just not taught that. We're not talking about money, finances, emotions, mental health, in our schooling system. And I was talking to someone yesterday. There's a very big difference between the schooling systems that we have and education. Very different. What we're doing, this is education. Sitting in a classroom and getting taught what somebody wants to teach you, that is schooling, and that is very different. So I think now I'm going to task you with this. You're going to have to now stand up for these things and start fighting for schools to, I don't know what it is. I was just thinking about when you were talking, schools to start introducing an education on how to understand your feelings. Like, how much would that help especially our men in society, women too, but especially the men in society, because unfortunately it is a masculine run society. It just is. Now that's slowly changing. Like the amount of women elected to large government positions in 2020 was fascinating, and I think the most in history, right? Like most walls torn down in history this time. So what do you do? Like this is why my coaching business is successful, because I wanted to understand this for myself, and then I wanted to teach other men.
First of all, I love your story, and there are so many similarities that I have with your story as well. My parents have always told me that I was a very emotional child. I was very expressive of my emotions. But one day, I had a really bad experience, whether it was like a romantic rejection or whatever that might be. And I just kind of shut myself down. Okay, no more showing emotions, no more showing feelings. That's not good for me. And I started to suppress my emotions, and kind of started to get the results that I thought I wanted. So like I just kept going at it, and I was conditioned by the societal, reconditioning and all that stuff as well. And I realized I was only able to express myself with anger and aggression as well. But I knew deep down I had feelings, but I kept ignoring. I kept ignoring those feelings and didn't spend any time or effort to kind of connect with those feelings.
Sure.
And and then I didn't like that at one point. And I realized that during my journey, this like name changing journey, and writing my book and all that stuff. But yeah, going back to your education piece, I couldn't agree with you more. I think school needs to teach kids about finance, like real finance stuff, sex education,
but real
gender,
sex education,
exactly, like race and like all those intersectionality stuff. I think it's super important to teach younger generations, and that's the kind of work that I'm into right now. So I've given some speeches or like educational seminars to high school students, elementary school students, and university students in Japan so far. And, the questions, that their thought process is so different from my generation, which gives me so much hope for the future.
Yeah.
And, that's the kind of work that I want to continue doing. And at the corporate level, we need to change the policies and the system itself, right? Unless the system changes, we're not going to see a massive change in our society. Because systematically, we're set up this way. We're set up to, celebrate masculinity over femininity. And, we're in a system where men are more getting the more benefits out of the system that we have, right? That's why we see pretty much all male leaders at the top, whether it's political leaders or CEOs. You know, there are some female leaders out there, but we need more representation at the top so that we can see the systematic, the policy changes that's going to really affect the entire society to change, the culture to change. So I think, you know, the senior leaders definitely need to be educated as well and actually take action for their organization, their community, in their community, and in their institution. And that's how we're going to see the real change in for gender equality.
It's interesting you say, like, when you said that, there's a book and I'm trying to remember the name. I feel like it was called Escape from Wall Street. I don't know why that just keeps coming up for me, but I remember reading this article about this woman who was a big level player on Wall Street, big level player. And she said, this is very tough for me to do, but like, you know, the reason why I'm leaving is the reason why I'm so successful. And she said basically she was good, top of her class at Stanford, like, you know, finance degrees and accounting degrees and economics degrees and all kinds of like really great accolades from like scholastic accolades. And then she got on Wall Street and started doing really, really well. Like the trajectory was going better than any of her let's call it classmates at this very big firm. And one day she just had a breakdown and the feminine poured out and she cried right on like the cold call floor. And she got her ass busted. First of all, she was a very minority, right? She was an Asian woman on that floor, right? With a lot of white and Asian men. And she said that she got her ass busted so hard for showing weakness that cover up, right? The masculine energy that she had to then like kind of the mask she had to pull over. It drove her so hard that if she's not the best, she'll die here. So she lost her family, she lost her home, like she lost everything, her individuality, everything, her personality, just to be the best, just to be able to be the top dog and be able to fire all those people or discipline them or not be able to be talked to like that. Because if you're the best, you're not getting your butt busted, right? So literally that entire thing for 10 years of her life, she took a traumatic situation like that and she turned it into a positive, if you really want to call it that, but the losses and the sacrifices that she made were so great that after 10 years, she hit this wall and looked around and she had nobody. And I will get the name and I'll put it in the show notes. I'm going to try and find it. And I remember she had moved to, she literally left one day. She left, went home, packed a bag, gave her keys to a real estate agent, said, sell it as is. Don't care what you get for it. It's paid off. Doesn't matter. Like sold her apartment and moved to the Caribbean and started a small business down there selling like, I don't know, like she was like a bar and like beach activities. And I thought that was so neat. And I remember thinking and talking to one of my friends about it, like how interesting is that? And how many people actually go through that to where they cover up so much just to be liked, that their success, and I know a lot of CEOs like this, their success got them to the top. Like their success at the top is because of how fearful they were of a well-rounded personality, right? Mm-hmm. And the emotions and the feelings and the vulnerability that they felt that would never work in that world. That I think is where a lot of change needs to happen as well. You know, like,
yeah,
I've gotten emotional with employees in both respects. I've screamed and I've cried. And both times my attitude is, I don't give a shit what you think about me. Like, I'm more upset with myself for screaming, right? I just, when I have people that are so capable, I'm screaming because you're like, what are you doing? What are you not seeing in your capability? I'm seeing it. Why are you so like mismatched? But the emotional piece is like, I had somebody mess something up once in my business. It cost me $12,000, and I was really emotional because they're such a great person. And I told them, you don't have to leave. Like, you just learned a $12,000 mistake with my money and 3,000 of yours. Like, it's best that you stay now. You're never going to make that again. And they were so embarrassed they had to leave. And I was really emotional because as a leader, like I didn't feel like I was open enough for them before that, for them to come to me and share with me what they were experiencing, feeling. So my leadership journey opened up when I tapped into and accessed more vulnerability within myself and gave myself permission as a leader, as a CEO, like as a high level real estate agent at that time. My life opened up, right? My relationships opened up, especially having a daughter. I don't think that I'd be the father I am today without understanding that level of depth within inside of me, right? Being sympathetic and empathetic to her. She is me. If you ever will look at my Facebook page and see all the videos we shoot, she is me, just in a 5-year-old female form, you know? I think what you're doing is really fantastic because it brings awareness, and that's key. Illumination is the first step. You got to be aware. You got to know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. I think awareness, that's exactly what I want to do. I'm not telling anybody to do something like a certain way. I'm just I kind of want to share my story so that people maybe ask themselves some questions that they never asked before, so that people can like start to think about like, oh, what does this mean to me? You know, why am I acting this way? Is it because I'm a man and I've been conditioned to act this way? Because I'm a woman and I've been conditioned to act this way by society, you know? And when you start to question those things, like, you know, what I found was like, no, I don't like this. Like, I don't care about what society tells me. This is what I want to do.
Right.
And that's usually where I find my courage, and then like a vulnerability. And then I take action to go for what I want, as opposed to what society or whoever tells me to go after. But yeah, that's the work in it.
I wanted to ask you, so did your wife say to you, like, she's not an extremist, right? She's sounds like a really nice lady. Did
she is.
It's this way or the highway, or it's if we don't do that, if you don't do this, we don't get married? Or did she leave the choice up to you? And then what you discovered through, even like, what did you discover just through processing this choice? Now, without I'm making it, but what did you discover through just processing the choice of taking her last name?
Yeah. So when she told me that she didn't want to just take my name, I wasn't upset. That actually gave me the opportunity to think about myself. Because if I said like, hey, I'm not going to take your name, okay, so what should we do, right? Because if I'm allowed to say that, she should be allowed to say that too. So that really got me thinking like, okay, what can we do as a couple? Because it's not like, oh, because you're women, you're the wife in this relationship, you should be taking my name. Like, I didn't think that way. Or her comment made me realize like, I shouldn't say that, because I do believe that we're equal partnership. So that kind of gave me the opportunity to go a step further and ask myself, or ask ourselves, what can we do if either of us is taking just the partner's name? What can we do? And then inevitably the answer was to combine our last names. So that's what we did.
I love that.
So it wasn't like my way or highway.
Yeah.
It was more about, hey, here's the thing. This is what I want. And what do you want, first of all? And what can we do as a couple? So it was very inclusive, I felt like, the way she approached this question. So I didn't feel like I was threatened or pressured to do anything. But it was more I was more in the partnership with her to do what works for us as a couple.
What I want to paint the opposite side, because it's a lot of pardon the pun, it's a lot like flowers and roses and everything's pretty and awesome with what you've done. What I want to know the other side. I'm just curious. backlash or the criticism you've faced, or have you faced any, or are we living in a more evolved world now, or are there people that just, I mean, look, we have seen ignorance beyond what we ever imagined possible, over the last couple of years, and what have you been surprised with how people have reacted to this book? Have you gotten nothing? Have you gotten some just shitty people? Or I'm curious.
The responses that I've gotten, the feedback that I've gotten, is overwhelmingly it's positive, and I feel the warmth within me when I read those messages, and I'm glad that I published it, because I was so scared to kind of show my life, like be exposed to.
What did you think would happen? Like, what were you actually afraid of, being that vulnerable, like putting that onto paper, immortalizing it, basically? I mean, you never take it back.
Yeah. So like, what if no one cares about what I have to say? Or what if people will judge me, for being who I am? Like, oh my gosh, like, be a man. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you supporting feminism? Like, that's for women's movement. Like, you're a man. Like, be a man. That's the kind of voice that I had in my head constantly. So it took me a long time to like actually submit my manuscript, because I knew once I did, I had to go through, like follow through. But that's, if you don't have that kind of voice in your head, you're not doing something that's courageous. Like, if it's comfortable for you, you're not challenging yourself enough. And that's how I felt. And I was like, okay, this is good. Like, it's really challenging me. And the other side was like, I really want to do this because, this is who I am. And this is the message that I have for the world. So I'm going to do it. And I chose to listen to that voice. And I'm glad I did. And as for backlash, I've gotten some backlash, that men shouldn't be supporting, or like I shouldn't be supporting feminism in this way. Like, I'm just trying to get attention by claiming that I'm a feminist as a man.
I mean,
I'm just like,
is that a backwards person just telling you that?
I'm not sure. It's something that I got like anonymously, so I don't know who said it.
Really?
But sounds like this person is like a big time feminist. Actually, they thought that I was, I needed to check my male privilege. Like, I'm just trying to. Exactly. Yeah, I'm just trying to do this to get attention or something like that, and I'm not. I'm trying to get attention to the issue that we have, and then men need to realize that this is a real thing, and we need to be involved in achieving gender equality, supporting gender equality. So that's the kind of attention that I want, not for myself, but for men to realize that this is a real thing, and we need to actually take action.
Sure. I mean, it's also, well, first of all, you have to live under a rock to think that after getting to know you and just seeing how genuine and authentic you are, I don't know, for the last hour, this isn't self-serving at all. And if it is, it's yourself, you're serving, you're getting served through the message that you're spreading, right? It's not like, oh, I have to spread this message to get attention because nobody's paying attention to me. You're saying, I want to get this message out there, and subsequently I'm going to get attention for this, and whatever, it's a bonus. That's fine. I'm willing to take it. Like you said, before you turned in your manuscript, I'm going to get, this is going to come with something. Am I ready for whatever comes? It's so small if you think about it, right? It's so small. It's not, you're not like, you're not fighting like labor rights or maternity rights or things like that. This is actually very small, but it's just a little, it's a little piece to the whole feminism puzzle and pie. And I've really never dove into this subject at all. I've never really thought about it. Like the girl that I was telling you, Kate, I talked a little bit about it with her, but I've just never gotten into it with anybody because I don't know, maybe people don't want to have that conversation with me. but not even on here, just in my personal life, you know. And I knew some girls in college that were like super feminists, but I think that's where a lot of stereotypes come from, because they were very vocal about their feminism, very vocal about male chauvinism, like very vocal, and it was a big turnoff. And it didn't matter that they were feminists; it would have been a turnoff to anybody that was that extreme. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In anything they were
Mm-hmm.
doing. So I think what you're doing is cool, man. It's however you need to move the needle for the world. It's awesome. You know, it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, like I'm doing this to lift up women because they've been oppressed, and I believe in gender, you know, every person having the same equal opportunities to things. And also I'm doing this for other men as well. There are so many benefits for men, like feeling free. So what I mean by that is that, you know, if we're only allowed by the societal standards that we need to be like masculine, like, you know, this hyper masculinity, and rejecting femininity, like we actually giving ourselves the opportunity to explore the femininity that we all have within us, right? Men, obviously. And, you know, by promoting this, we're going to create a society that's going to celebrate, that's going to embrace that part of us. And I think that's going to be great. You know, we can share things, like share our emotions, whatever we might be. And I think that's a beautiful thing for a culture. And that's going to free a lot of men to feel that to know that manhood doesn't have to be a certain way. It can be whatever the way that you want it to be, not by the societal norms, but, you know, how you define manhood. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well said, man. And I was thinking about my daughter and all this. Like when I first saw your bio come over, I was thinking about my daughter and how I could be supportive to her, because you know, since she was obviously since she was brand new, I've had this mindset of empowering her from the inside, so that, you know, when society, because it just unfortunately just is for little girls, especially in a time of social media, when society starts to push down, and, you know, if she winds up going to regular school, which I don't care. I don't have any need for her to go to regular school. I like homeschool and private school, so it's totally fine. But I want her to be so powerful inside that the exterior, it might phase a little bit, but it's not going to tear her apart. Like, you know, I watch so many little girls who are just the sweetest little people, and then they go out into the public school world. And I'm not saying anything about public schools. Don't get on me, not you, but like, don't get on me for that. I have my own opinions. But like, they get ripped up by other women, society, little boys. Like they're just tossed around in the waves. And I just wanted my daughter to have an incredible shot at owning her power as she goes out into society and becomes exposed more. Like, I want her to own that from the inside. And yes, she can take shots and shrapnel from the exterior, but like, I thought about it. What would it be like for me to empower her internal dialogue, her internal structure, her internal self-love and self-care and everything, so she goes out into the world and it's just this beaming light and is unaffected or less affected. But then you talking actually reminds me, like, my son will be 1 next week, and it's actually more of what you're doing is for my son, who, like me and like you, I'm sure as my kid, he's going to have a more of a level of emotional intelligence to him and emotional awareness, because listen, dad's been known to cry at least once a week or maybe once a month at something that just brings up emotion to me, and I just let it flow. You know, I did an ayahuasca ceremony a couple years ago, and I saw that my relationship with my wife was blocked because I wouldn't show emotion. Right. And if anybody, you or anyone listening knows about ayahuasca, it is a very powerful plant medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
when I got home, it shut me down literally by taking my knees out, and I hit the ground in my living room, and my wife came over, and it just like the tears just started. I mean, it was like I never cried that hard before. And
Wow.
she saw that different side of me, and I realized that it was fine and I was okay. And I showed her that vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
side, and our relationship changed that day. So
Mm-hmm.
this household is going to have some tears in it from everybody. And I want my son to not feel like he can't express himself. But the other thing, like we were talking about in the beginning, is I want to make sure that my kids and anybody that comes across me, either as a mentor, a coach, a leader, a boss, some kind of figurehead in this world, like, you can share your emotions, just do it responsibly. Don't throw up on somebody, but
Yeah.
be responsible and accountable, and talk to somebody and say, look, I'm feeling this, and I'm just not sure if this is this or this, but I'd like to share that with you. And don't like
Mm-hmm.
pounce on them, but it's totally fine. So what would it be like for a little girl to go out into the world and be a powerhouse, but not
Mm-hmm.
an egotist, like a-hole, but just be in this beautiful flow of masculine and feminine? And then for our son, you have a son, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Mm-hmm.
our sons to be able to show all their masculinity and then counterbalance into their feminine side, and know their emotions and feelings, like what type of people are we tossing out into the world, and what kind of difference and change can they make? That's fascinating. That's really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think society and parents have done a better job
Yeah.
having our daughters, like girls, explore, the other side of the gender spectrum. So, like, in the past few decades, society has been telling girls to, here, empowerment, be independent,
Yeah.
be strong. And I think those are great messages. But we're not doing the same for boys. Boys are still stuck with just be boys,
Yeah.
but we need to do a better job raising our sons to be more kind, to be empathetic, and then being able to show emotions in a powerful way. There's a big difference between having your emotions control you and controlling your emotions, but also like expressing them in a very powerful way.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, now that I have a son, I feel very responsible to raise my son that way. And yeah, I think we got to do both, not just like raising strong girls and daughters, but also kind and yeah, showing femininity to our boys and sons is equally important. Yeah,
I totally agree. And listen, if I have to, if the public school system, or even the general private school system isn't supportive of that, not that that's the only catalyst, but like I think about the leader that I've been able to become by bridging that gap and being counterbalanced in those energies. What kind of leaders could we breed here if our school system could actually jump on board with that? But then you gotta really teach it at the school level anyway, because then
mm-hmm.
you come up through it, and then it's in college, and it's in the all that stuff. It's a giant cycle. I think we're in a beautiful cycle with it, right? It hasn't just started.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a beautiful cycle with it. But you're right, and you might be a trailblazer, buddy, with the male movement for accessing a different understanding of what being a male is, gender role,
Thank
all
you.
the stuff. Yeah, it's really cool. I didn't even think about
Yeah.
that. I told you I wouldn't read your book until I had you on here, because I honestly like to learn things about people live versus, or during the recording, versus me knowing a ton about you and then pretending like I'm asking you for the first time, but I already know. I actually like it the way we do it here. So I really enjoy this.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think our leadership needs more inclusivity. And then I think being inclusive leaders is what makes a big change, impact to the future generations, right? And we talked about how important education is, because, there are the next generation, the younger generation is, they're going to be the ones to really make a change in our society in a decade or two, or maybe shorter than that. And they're going to be living this world, after us too. So I think making an impact to that generation is so crucial. And in order to do that, yes, schooling system, the policies and systems in our society and culture, they need to shift as well, so that it's going to make better sense for the next generation. So
I agree.
Yeah, that's the kind of work that I want to continue to be in. And I'd love to get connected with other. I know there are other leaders out there who feel the same way, and I want to continue to work on that.
That's good stuff, man. I love it. Well, look, let's. I could ask you like 20 more questions, but I promise my editors I keep all these to an hour, because some of them I give my editors and they're like, this is 2.5 hours, man. What do you want us to do with this? So I promised I'd keep them to an hour. Shu, I really appreciate you being on here, man, and thank your podcast bookers for reaching out to me and ensuring that I took another look at your bio and your messaging and your position and everything you're doing here. So like, I really appreciate you being on here, man. Really great message.
Thanks so much for inviting me to be on your show. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Had a great time talking to you.
I can't wait to get a Men on Purpose t-shirt in your hands all the way to Japan.
I love it. Oh, You're wearing it. I love it. Yeah.
I now wear one every day, man. Like I bought so many of them, and I did a last week, which not when this airs, but like in January when I was in LA, I did a post that said, "Send me home naked." On Facebook. So I think I'm going to go home naked, like take all the shirts. I'm going to ship all my stuff home, my podcast gear, my suitcase. I'm going to ship it home before me. I'm only going to maybe wear one shirt. And I said to people, like, go on, subscribe to Men on Purpose podcast and write a 5-star review, and then send me a screenshot, privately, and your address, and I'll send you a shirt. And like first 50 came in like 10 minutes. So I was like, damn, I got to order.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Plus, I only ordered medium and large, and everybody was like medium and extra large 2XL. So I still have a couple larges, but it's cool, man. That's totally fine. I'd love to. This brand is awesome, man. I mean, the way we took this thing and really ran with it and built it to what it is today. I mean, it was going to be mothballed when I took it over. So I love what it's doing for guys like you to spread your message and then listen to other men who are empowering and changing and elevating and evolving. I just love it, man. It's so cool. So thanks, brother. Appreciate you being on here.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure.
It's been awesome. Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to the Men on Purpose podcast, where our mission is to educate, elevate, and activate every man to truly live their best, most fulfilling life possible. To find out more about the podcast, our guests, or becoming a man on purpose, visit menonpurposepodcast.com and choose your most purposeful path forward.